When a forest fire spreads across California, all vehicles must stop until firefighters resolve the situation, as the road is closed. At that moment, Everett, who is on a school bus, begins to have a panic attack and calls his psychiatrist for help. During the call, the young man reveals that he is exercising and taking care of his health, but this is not helping to reduce his anxiety. Therefore, he asks for permission to increase his medication dosage, but he does not have time to hear the doctor's response, as something outside the window catches his attention. Looking outside, Everett realizes that the flames are approaching, and at that moment, the students receive a message saying that classes have been cancelled because all schools in the area have been closed due to the fire. After searching the internet, the students realize that several neighborhoods are being evacuated, and they begin to worry about their families. At that moment, Austin opens the bus door and gets out of the vehicle. Suddenly, everyone hears strange sounds coming from the forest and is stunned to see wild animals running onto the roads. Concerned about what might happen, people abandon their vehicles and flee on foot, as this is the only way to get out of the traffic jam. When he sees a wild ram approaching with its body on fire, Everett realizes he is in danger and hurries to join his colleagues in their escape. As soon as he leaves the vehicle, the young man sees a woman being attacked by a deer and hears Austin asking him to return to the bus. According to Austin, there is something hiding in the fog, and shortly after saying this, he is dragged into the flames. After seeing several people being attacked by wild animals, Everett looks for an escape route, but ends up being saved by Blake. After seeing several bodies scattered across the road, the girl is completely traumatized, but manages to help one of her classmates survive. When she gets up, Everett realizes that Blake has been bitten by something, but apparently, she is fine. Realizing that his shoulder is injured, the young man runs into the forest in search of shelter and sees a fire department helicopter trying to contain the fire. When she finally makes it home, Blake realizes she has a huge scar, but pretends to be fine so as not to worry her father and younger brother. Upon arriving at the hospital, after losing a lot of blood, Everett sees Connor, his classmate who tried to escape using crutches, and Austin, the young man he believed had been devoured. When asked about the origin of that injury, Everett reveals that he was bitten by a wolf, so he is sent to the infirmary. While resting and receiving IV fluids, the young man dreams of the ram he saw hours earlier, and from inside it, a handful of claws emerges. However, he wakes up to the sound of a phone ringing and decides to answer the call. At that moment, Everett hears a voice ordering him to grab his things and leave the hospital immediately. Without even introducing himself, the man on the other end of the line says that the wolf that bit Everett is after him and needs to find him before the next full moon. Since the animal cannot move properly during the day, Everett still has a few hours to escape, but he ends up passing out because the infection caused by the bite is spreading throughout his body. While sitting in the passenger seat of her father's car on the way to a hotel, Blake falls asleep and dreams of the moments of terror she experienced while trying to escape the fire. At that moment, she sees herself with sharp fangs biting Everett's shoulder, and begins to wonder if the mark on her body was caused by his bite. Hours later, Everett wakes up in a hospital bed next to his parents and discovers that several hours have passed since he fainted. Upon arriving at the hotel, Blake runs to the bathroom and realizes that her wound is even bigger than when she left home. After feeling intense pain, the girl falls to the floor, and when she gets up, she sees Everett in the mirror. Intrigued by the vision she had earlier, Blake decides to go after the young man, but Everett flees the hospital when he discovers that there are some investigators who want to talk to him. When they meet, the two young people comment on the changes they have noticed in their bodies in the last few hours, and suddenly, they are surprised by the arrival of a monster. After breaking into the house, the werewolf-like creature tries to reach the teenagers, but is attacked by a dog. While the creature tries to get rid of the animal, Everett and Blake look for a way out, and the young man uses his fists to break the wooden boards that were blocking their escape. When they manage to shake off the monster, the two teenagers decide to split up, and Blake returns to the hotel where her father and brother are staying. That night, Harlan and his sister Luna realize that their father has disappeared and ask the police for help in searching for him in the forest, but they only manage to find Garrett's truck. The two young people were rescued by the forest ranger when they were very young, and Garrett raised them as if they were his own children, even though he knew they were both werewolves. Meanwhile, Garrett tries to survive the fire all alone, and when he realizes he is surrounded by fire, he decides to record a farewell message for his adopted children. As it is a full moon night, Harlan and Luna end up being affected, as do Everett and Blake, who rush to the same meeting point. When they meet, the young people realize that they all attend the same school, and the two siblings are surprised to discover that there are other werewolves in town. While taking her two friends back to their homes, Luna asks if they were bitten by an animal, and Everett tries to show her the scar, but soon realizes that there is no longer a mark on his shoulder. The next day, Everett receives a visit from the police at his home, and Kristen reveals that her team is investigating to find out who was responsible for setting fire to the forest. The authorities suspect that the fire was intentional and have sent investigators to locate the criminal. According to Kristen, there are several indications that the person responsible for the fire is a student at the school where Everett studies, but the young man claims he has no information that could help them in the case. Later, he talks to Connor about what happened and discovers that he was also bitten. However, unlike Everett and Blake, Connor's wound is healing normally, like any other injury. But when he arrives at the hospital to have his leg x-rayed and take a dose of rabies medication, Connor begins to writhe in pain, and the doctor decides to keep him hospitalized to investigate whether the medication caused some kind of allergic reaction. Hours later, the young man receives a call from the same man who called Everett and discovers that he is in danger. Terrified, Connor calls his friend for help, and Everett says he will arrive at the hospital in a few minutes. However, while waiting, the young man senses a threatening presence and decides to flee despite his broken leg, but the werewolf goes after him. When Connor finally manages to leave the building, the creature catches up with him, and the teenager ends up being captured. That night, Garrett is found alive and rescued by emergency responders. He is then taken to the hospital, and his children go to visit him. Sometime later, Everett finds a piece of plaster near the fence and comes to the conclusion that his friend is in danger. However, before he can do anything to save Connor, the police show up, and the young man is caught red-handed. Upon arriving at the police station, Everett and his friends meet some of their schoolmates and discover that they are all being investigated by the police. While being questioned, the young man hears his friend's thoughts, and at that moment, the young werewolves realize that they can communicate telepathically. Before they get into trouble, Garrett shows up to pick up his children and takes Everett and Blake with him. During the trip, the park ranger discovers what happened to the teenagers and tells them that his truck was also attacked by a werewolf. In an attempt to escape the creature, Garrett ended up getting lost in the forest, but luckily he was rescued alive. When they arrive home, Everett and Blake say they received a call saying they are in danger, so Luna asks for help locking all the doors and windows, as no one can enter or leave the house until dawn. However, when a police officer knocks on the door, Harlan decides to go out to talk to him and is attacked. While trying to get a confession from the young man, Miller is attacked by the werewolf, and Harlan goes inside to hide. Minutes later, Miller gets up and sees the monster approaching. At that moment, he tries to escape, but ends up being dragged across the floor, and the monster uses its claws to press the cop's head against a tree. Afraid that the monster will break into the house, the teenagers decide to leave, and Everett comes face to face with the creature. Then, the werewolf hears the sound of a gunshot and decides to flee, so the young man begins to wonder why he was not attacked by the creature. After interviewing some survivors who made it out of the fire alive, Kristen realizes that there is a pattern, as several reports mention the existence of a werewolf, but she still refuses to believe that this creature is real. In an attempt to find out what happened to Connor, the police officer walks to the place where the cast he wore on his leg was found and ends up coming across a wounded ram. As she approaches the animal, Kristen notices that it has huge marks on its belly and concludes that it was attacked by the same creature that the teenagers reported seeing. In an attempt to find out what attacked the animal, the police officer schedules a meeting with Garrett, the most experienced forest ranger in town, who claims that the marks were made by a grizzly bear. Despite knowing the truth about the monster that attacked that sheep, Garrett decides to keep it a secret to ensure his children's safety. When he arrives home, he discovers that Luna has had a childhood memory unlocked, as the full moon is affecting her senses. Years ago, when she was just a girl, she visited the stable and ended up scaring her horse, as the animal sensed that something was wrong with her. As it was a full moon night, Luna ended up activating her powers involuntarily and attacked Thunder with her sharp claws. After that night, Garrett did everything he could to teach his children to contain the predator within them, and incidents like that never happened again. That night, Blake has to work a shift at the parking lot where she works, and decides to take her brother with her so he won't be alone at the hotel. After a few hours of work, the young woman sees a suspicious vehicle approaching and orders Danny to lie down so that no one can see him. Since the windows are covered with dark tinting, Blake can't see who's inside the vehicle, but she suspects it might be the man who has been calling her from an unknown number. In an attempt to clear up her doubts, the girl leaves Danny alone at the counter and walks to the parking lot, but cannot find the vehicle. While alone, the boy hears someone approaching and looks through the glass to find out who is on the other side. At that moment, he comes face to face with the werewolf and tries to take shelter under the table, but he can't hide for long. When she returns to the ticket window, Blake realizes that her brother has disappeared and begins to search for him desperately, but cannot find him. Terrified, the young woman calls her father for help, but is relieved to see Everett arriving in the parking lot with the boy in his arms. The young man says he heard Blake's screams echoing in his head and ran to help her, then ended up finding Danny on the way. Soon after, Luna and Harlan appear and say that they also heard Blake's screams, as they are all part of the same pack. That night, the werewolf drags the policeman's body to a hideout and throws Miller's body into a room along with the bodies of other people he has eliminated. After taking his brother home, Blake meets up with her friends at Garrett's house, and they all receive a call from an unknown number. In an attempt to find out who is insisting on talking to them, Everett answers the phone and discovers that every night the werewolf claims a new victim. If they want to stop him, the teenagers must go to the location indicated on the map, and when they get there, they find a woman trapped inside an overturned car. While trying to help her escape, the young people realize that the werewolf is nearby, and decide to flee after seeing the woman being dragged into the bushes. The following night, determined to stop the crime spree, the teenagers decide to once again follow the location Everett received from the unknown number, and realize that one of their classmates may be in danger. When they arrive at T. Patterson's house, they realize that a party is going on, and Harlan offers a packet of mushrooms in exchange for a free pass for him and his friends. The plan is to get everyone high so that no one will notice if the werewolf shows up. While the young people are having fun, Garrett works with the police to find out who was the arsonist who started the fire that almost destroyed the city. With the help of some satellite images, Kristen concludes that the fire started at the same time in two different places and suggests that one of these fires was started remotely. However, Garrett is convinced that the criminal used drones to transport the devices to the forest, so he wouldn't risk being affected by the flames. After a few hours of partying, Austin dives into the pool to retrieve his cell phone, which has just been thrown into the water. However, after retrieving the device, he realizes that there is a creature hiding in the water and becomes desperate. When he finally manages to return to the surface, the young man alerts his friends about what he saw, but they ignore him, as they all believe he is being affected by those mushrooms. However, when the werewolf approaches the surface, the young people realize that Austin was right, and they run inside the house. After closing the doors, the young people focus their attention on the intruder and panic when they see the animal approaching the glass doors. After following some clues, Kristen finally finds the place where the monster is hiding the bodies of its victims, but she shows no surprise at the sight of the gruesome scene. Terrified by the pile of bodies, Jason asks who eliminated those people, and Kristen says it was a werewolf. After revealing the truth about these creatures, the police officer attacks her colleague with the handle of her flashlight, and Jason's body ends up joining the others. After a few minutes trapped inside T's house, the young people begin to grow impatient, and some of them decide to take a risk and try to reach the car. Then, in an attempt to prevent his colleagues from leaving and being attacked, Everett decides to tell the truth and reveals that on the day the fire started, the animals in the forest were not only fleeing from the fire, but also from a creature that was hiding in the smoke. After describing the appearance of the monster waiting for them outside the house, the young man reveals that it was this same creature that captured Connor. According to Everett, all evidence points to this animal being a grizzly bear, but Austin knows this is not true, as he clearly remembers seeing a werewolf. Knowing that no one will believe his theory, Austin decides to keep the true nature of that predator a secret, so Cyrus decides to go out to look for a missing classmate, and Harlan goes after him to ensure his safety. After a few minutes of searching in the forest, the young people come across the werewolf, and Cyrus is almost attacked. However, before the monster can move, Kristen appears and points a gun at it. As the young people try to escape, the woman shoots, and Garrett runs into the forest when he hears the sound of the shots. After firing a few warning shots into the air, Kristen says she is not there to hurt him and offers to help the werewolf. At that moment, she hears the creature trying to communicate to ask for help, but the communication is interrupted by the arrival of the other police officers. When it senses the approach of other humans, the monster flees and ends up being spotted by Garrett, who does not hesitate to use his silver bullet against the werewolf. After being shot in the arm, the creature realizes that this is no ordinary bullet and disappears into the forest. Even after seeing the werewolf in person, Kristen insists on telling her co-workers that the creature prowling around the house was just a grizzly bear, and enlists Garrett's help in hiding the truth. Hours later, when everyone leaves, Phoebe puts her friend to bed and decides to stay at the house to take care of T, as the girl ends up eating some mushrooms. Unable to sleep, the young woman decides to take a dip in the pool and ends up becoming the werewolf's next victim. While napping in one of the bedrooms, Austin sees the young woman's body being dragged across the glass ceiling and alerts the police. Knowing that the police are after Cyrus, who is the prime suspect in starting the fire, Harlan decides to help him hide, as he believes in his friend's innocence. Then, when he finds out that his father has turned him into the police, the young man loses his mind and attacks Garrett. Overcome with rage, Harlan loses control, and the other members of his pack are also affected. When she arrives at the stable, Prisha sees the young men with sharp fangs and glowing eyes, so she points her gun at them. Over the years, she has been the only person with whom Garrett has shared the secret about his children, and this is the first time she has seen them like this. Before the woman can pull the trigger, Garrett manages to calm Harlan down, and automatically, all the other members of his pack return to normal. At that moment, the park ranger says he saw the true appearance of the wolf that invaded T's house, and Everett realizes that Baron, his schoolmate who disappeared during the party, is a werewolf. That night, while sleeping, Everett dreams of Baron and tries to help him remember who he is. However, the young man cannot give up his instincts and continues to show his claws while his skin burns. Seeing the young man walking through the house, Everett decides to follow him, and after going downstairs, he sees the monster running toward him. Terrified, Everett hides behind the kitchen counter, and when he gathers the courage to get up, he sees Phoebe's body. Suddenly, the young woman gets up and says that Baron can't control himself. Although his human side doesn't want to hurt people, his predatory side takes control every night, and if he isn't stopped, he will continue to attack the townspeople. The next day, Phoebe's body is found in the hotel room where Blake and her family are staying, and Kristen sends some police officers to look for the girl, as she will be questioned along with everyone else who was at T's house. Suspecting that Austin is the next victim, Everett and his friends decide to set up an ambush to capture the werewolf that is terrorizing the city. When he discovers that his life is in danger, Austin decides to cooperate and agrees to use his own body as bait to lure the monster into the trap. During the night, when the monster appears, Austin and Luna lock themselves in a hiding place, and then Blake takes the young man's coat to lure the werewolf into a refrigerator. While being chased, the young woman enters an ice chamber and bares her fangs to try to prevent the attack, but the creature continues to try to attack her. Suddenly, Everett appears and manages to grab the animal's paw, but ends up being captured. At that moment, he calls Baron by name and manages to free himself. After leaving the room, the young people close the door and lock the werewolf inside the refrigerator. When the beast's heart stops beating, Everett and his friends open the door and find Baron in his human form. The plan was to use the epinephrine injection to bring him back, but instead, Austin stabs Baron in the chest with a silver dagger. That afternoon, Kristen asks Harlan for help in searching for the bodies of the missing people, and tells him that she lost her son and husband in a fire. What the woman decides to keep secret is the fact that both were werewolves, just like her. When she saw the group of firefighters who attacked her husband walking through the forest, the woman transformed and went after them, eliminating them one by one. Seeing the monster approaching, Malcolm decided to abandon his friends and managed to escape while the other team members were attacked. After the battle, Kristen rested next to a tree and was found by a search team hours later. At dusk, Garrett finally finds the hideout where the werewolf is storing the bodies of his victims. Upon seeing all those bodies, the park ranger convinces Kristen not to report what she has just found to the police, because if the authorities find out what happened, they will both be removed from the case, as the special police department will take over the investigation. In an attempt to save Baron's life, Everett pulls the blade out of his heart and asks his friends for help to stop the bleeding. While the team tries to figure out how to save Baron's life, Everett receives a call from the unknown number and discovers that the only way to save the werewolf is if they find a way to remove the silver from his blood. According to the mysterious man, if Baron doesn't survive, Luna and Everett's powers will disappear, and they will both return to being ordinary teenagers, as the bond between them will be broken. At that moment, the young people discover that it was Baron who turned them into werewolves, and they decide to ask Garrett for help. After discovering that Baron is the werewolf who has been attacking people, the park ranger decides to take him to the hospital, even though he knows that he could transform at any moment. That afternoon, Blake and her brother are sent to a children's shelter, as the police realize that Robert was not taking proper care of his children. As for Everett, his own father, together with his psychiatrist, decided to hospitalize the young man on the pretext that, in addition to not taking his medication, he has also been exhibiting strange behavior. That same day, Harlan is arrested, as the police have reason to believe that he was the one who eliminated Agent Miller. Through an anonymous tip, the local police found the warehouse where the werewolf's victims' bodies were gathered, and as expected, Kristen ends up being removed from the case. When she discovers that Malcolm started the fire, the police officer goes after him and finds out that the firefighter spent several years waiting for this moment. Malcolm's goal is to avenge the eliminations of his colleagues, and knowing that Kristen is a werewolf, he went to meet her armed with silver bullets. While trying to protect herself from the shots, the woman hits Malcolm in the leg, and at that moment, Garrett appears to help her. When she sees the forest ranger helping Baron, Kristen decides to tell the truth and reveals that she is the biological mother of Harlan and Luna. According to Kristen, Baron is their brother, and when she sees one of her children about to lose his life, she uses her powers to heal him. Seeing his enemy off guard, Malcolm shoots, but Kristen manages to stop him from hitting his target. During the fight, the man grabs his axe to attack the werewolf and claims that Kristen is no longer as strong as she used to be, as she has spent too much time living as a human. Feeling challenged, the predator decides to show her true strength and takes Malcolm out. After handcuffing him, Kristen tries to convince Garrett to teach Baron to live like a normal teenager, as he did with Harlan and Luna. However, the woman's plans go beyond that, because to ensure that the park ranger remains her ally, she needs Baron to turn him into a werewolf. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps.